Live television is unpredictable by nature, but sometimes that unpredictability turns into something truly horrifying. Over the years, millions of viewers have witnessed shocking moments unfold in real-time incidents no one could edit, censor, or rewind before they reach the public. Now, we're looking at 5 of the most horrifying moments in live TV history scenes that were never meant to be seen, but became unforgettable pieces of broadcast history. In July 2010, the United Kingdom found itself glued to their television screens as a nightmare unfolded in real time. What started as a breaking news alert quickly turned into a nationwide manhunt, with entire towns locked down and armed officers sweeping through quiet countryside roads. For days, viewers weren't just watching the news, they were watching a tragedy build second by second, not knowing how or when it would end. It had all begun only 2 days after 37-year-old Raoul Moat walked out of Durham prison. In the early hours of July 3rd, he arrived at a house in Birtley, Gateshead, where his ex-girlfriend Samantha Stobbart was staying with her new partner, 29-year-old karate instructor Chris Brown. Moat didn't knock on the door. He didn't call out. Instead, he hid outside in the darkness for more than an hour, waiting. When Brown finally stepped outside, Moat fired a sawn-off shotgun at close range, killing him instantly. Moments later, another blast shattered the silence as he fired through the window into the house, striking Samantha in the arm and abdomen. She was rushed to hospital under armed guard, clinging to life as surgeons fought to save her. But the horror didn't end there. Only hours after the shooting, Moat handed a 49-page letter to a friend, a rambling manifesto filled with rage, justifications, and chilling threats directed at the police. And he wasn't done. Shortly after midnight on July 4th, Police Constable David Rathband was sitting in his patrol car near East Denton, Newcastle. Minutes earlier, Moat had called the police himself, announcing what he was about to do. Then, without warning, he approached the vehicle and fired twice through the window. Rathband survived, but the attack left him permanently blinded. His life changed forever in a matter of seconds. By then, the country was on edge. Moat had become the most wanted man in Britain, and the police response was unlike anything seen in modern times. More than 160 armed officers were deployed. Reinforcements poured in from across the UK. Armored anti-terror vehicles rolled into the region. Sniper teams took positions across hills and forests, and even a Royal Air Force jet equipped with infrared surveillance scanned the countryside from above. The search soon focused on Rothbury, a quiet town surrounded by dense woodland that Moat knew well. Suddenly, everyday life came to a halt. Schools were placed under armed guard. Residents were told to stay inside. False sightings triggered dramatic raids across the region. On live television, viewers watched helicopters hovering over rooftops, armed officers patrolling empty streets, and roadblocks sealing off entire communities. It felt less like a police search and more like a war zone, and it was all happening in real time. Then, on July 9th, the story reached its final, terrifying chapter. Police located Moat on a riverbank near Rothbury. He was alone, holding a shotgun to his own head. For nearly 6 hours, negotiators tried to talk him down, while media crews reported live from behind the police cordon. The entire country seemed to hold its breath. At one point, officers fired an experimental long-range taser, hoping to save his life, but it had no effect. Then, at around 1:15 a.m. on July 10th, the tension snapped. A single gunshot cut through the silence. Moat had pulled the trigger himself. He was rushed to Newcastle General Hospital, but it was already too late. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The aftermath left deep scars. Samantha survived, but with permanent injuries and memories that would never fade. Chris Brown's family mourned a life taken in an instant. David Rathband spent nearly 3 weeks in hospital, trying to adapt to a world without sight. 2 years later, still struggling, he took his own life. In the days that followed, the country was forced to confront uncomfortable questions. Had the rolling, round-the-clock coverage turned a violent fugitive into a spectacle? On social media, disturbing groups appeared, glorifying Moat and romanticizing his crimes. What began as a police manhunt had turned into a national obsession, raising serious concerns about the line between reporting the news and sensationalizing tragedy.
he can do now is just come to the place where he last was.
Andrea Silva leaving flowers at the monument honoring her uncle, killed in the station nightclub fire.
On the night of February 20th, 2003, no one walking into the station nightclub in West Warwick, Rhode Island, thought they were stepping into history, let alone into a nightmare. Friends laughed, drinks were raised, and the room buzzed with anticipation as hundreds of fans packed in to see Jack Russell's Great White take the stage. What none of them knew was that within minutes, celebration would turn into sheer terror, and the entire world would later watch it happen on video. At 11:07 p.m., the band launched into their opening song, Desert Moon. The crowd surged forward, shoulder to shoulder. 462 people crammed into a space licensed for far fewer. Then, in a split second, everything changed. Tour manager Daniel Bichel ignited 4 pyrotechnic devices designed to spray sparks above the stage. 2 shot outward at an angle, 2 straight up. The sparks looked harmless at first, almost routine, until they touched the foam lining the walls and ceiling behind the drummer. The flames didn't creep, they exploded. Fire raced upward in seconds, licking across the ceiling like it was being pulled by an unseen force. At first, some people clapped, thinking it was part of the show, but then thick black smoke began pouring down, burning eyes and stealing breath. The music stopped. Screams replaced cheers. Panic set in as the reality hit. This wasn't a performance. This was a fire, and it was spreading impossibly fast. Instinct took over. Most of the crowd turned toward the front entrance, the way they had come in, but the narrow hallway became a death trap almost instantly. Bodies pressed together. People tripped, fell, and were crushed as others pushed from behind, desperate for air. Movement slowed, then stopped entirely. Those trapped inside the bottleneck screamed for help as smoke filled their lungs. Some tried the stage door, only to find it blocked, reportedly reserved for the band. A few found other exits, an employee-only door, a bar exit. Others smashed windows at the front of the building, clawing their way out through broken glass. But for many, there was nowhere to go. The heat intensified. The smoke grew thicker. The room became unrecognizable in moments. All of it was captured on camera. Local news videographer Brian Butler had been inside the club filming a segment on nightclub safety. His footage shows the chaos unfolding in real time. People stacked on top of one another, crawling, collapsing, gasping for breath as visibility dropped to almost nothing. At one point, Butler put the camera down and began helping people escape, kicking out windows to create openings. The fire continued to rage behind him. Within minutes, the building was completely engulfed. There was no sprinkler system to slow the flames. The fire alarm wasn't properly connected. The West Warwick Fire Department began receiving frantic 911 calls within 60 seconds of the fire starting. Crews arrived just 6 minutes later, joined by firefighters from surrounding towns. But by then, the damage was irreversible. By 1:30 a.m., the fire was under control. What remained was devastation. When the smoke cleared, the scale of the loss was almost impossible to comprehend. 100 people were dead. Among them were 4 employees, the band's guitarist Ty Longley and local DJ Mike Gonsalves. More than 230 others were injured, many with severe burns and permanent physical damage. Only 132 people walked away without injury. Survivors carried not just scars, but memories, many later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, haunted by the sounds, the heat, and the faces they couldn't forget. The investigations that followed uncovered a chain of fatal failures. Highly flammable polyurethane foam lined the walls. The club was overcrowded. Pyrotechnics had been used without proper authorization. There was no sprinkler system. What had worked safely at other venues became deadly inside that room. Criminal charges and civil lawsuits followed. Bichelet pleaded guilty to 100 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The club's owners accepted plea deals. Civil settlements totaled $176 million, yet no court ruling could undo what happened in those few minutes. Television viewers across Italy expected an ordinary news update in 2024. Another brief report about a death in a quiet town. The kind of story that usually fades after a few minutes. But what unfolded on live television that day was something far more disturbing. It was the kind of moment that makes people freeze in front of their screens, unsure whether what they're watching is really happening. Within minutes, routine reporting turned into a real-time confession, and millions of viewers found themselves witnessing a tragedy far more intimate and far more chilling than anyone could have imagined. The story began in the small town of Spezzano di Fiorano, in the province of Modena. On a quiet Sunday, 80-year-old Loretta Lini was found dead in her bed by her daughter. Loretta had been living with dementia and Alzheimer's, illnesses that had slowly eroded her memory and independence, placing an increasing burden on those around her. Police quickly suspected foul play, and attention turned to her 50-year-old son, Lorenzo Carbone, who had been her primary caregiver for more than 15 years. Carbone had disappeared after the incident, prompting a search across the surrounding areas. Officers and drones scanned the nearby town of Pavulo, where he had reportedly gone after leaving the house. Later, he would say he hadn't been hiding, just wandering the streets, trying to escape the weight of what had happened, trying to put distance between himself and the scene. But fate had something else planned. When Carbone returned to his mother's home the next day, he ran straight into a television crew from the talk show Pomeriggio Cinque, who were already there covering the developing story. Cameras were rolling, microphones were out, and suddenly, the man at the center of the investigation was standing in front of them. He looked confused, exhausted, and emotionally shattered. Reporter Fabio Giuffrida asked him a few questions, likely expecting denials or vague answers. Instead, Carbone did something no one anticipated. He confessed. On live television, in front of a rolling camera, he began describing what had happened. His voice trembled as he spoke about trying to suffocate his mother with a pillow and pillowcase. Then, in halting, emotional fragments, he admitted he had used shoelaces to end her life. He said the strain of caregiving, the repetitive behaviors, the unpredictability of her condition had pushed him past his limits. He said he couldn't take it anymore. He said he acted in a moment of desperation, even though he knew exactly what he was doing. As he spoke, he broke down again and again, his words tangled in grief, anger, and regret. It wasn't the composed statement of a suspect. It was a raw, emotional unraveling, broadcast live into millions of homes. The reporter, stunned by what he had just heard, immediately contacted the Carabinieri. Officers arrived quickly and arrested Carbone. But by then, the moment had already gone out to the entire country. The confession, the breakdown, the arrest, it all aired live on Canal 5, anchored by journalist Myrta Merlino. The reaction was immediate and intense. Viewers were shocked. Media professionals were outraged. Many questioned whether it was ethical to broadcast such a confession in real time, especially when the man on camera was visibly distressed and confused. Some called it a new low for television. Others described it as a media circus that crossed the line between journalism and exploitation. As Carbone was taken into custody and Loretta's body prepared for autopsy, the broadcast itself became part of the story. What began as a simple news report ended as one of the most unsettling live moments.
And if you want something to happen to you
It was July 15th, 1989, during a live broadcast of the BBC children's show UP2U from Manchester. The program had the familiar energy of a Saturday morning. Lively hosts, fun segments, and a young audience expecting nothing more than light-hearted entertainment. 26-year-old presenter Anthea Turner was seated casually on the tailgate of a van, smiling and ready to introduce a motorcycle stunt team performing as part of a promotion for the Royal Tournament. Around her, the atmosphere felt controlled, rehearsed, and safe. But behind the scenes, something had gone terribly wrong. As Turner began speaking, a stunt rider misunderstood her cue. What should have been a simple introduction was mistaken for the signal to launch. In an instant, the motorcycle surged forward and the pyrotechnics ignited, while Turner was still sitting just inches away. The explosion came without warning. Flames burst outward, catching her hair, jacket, and hands. The force of the blast, combined with the movement of the rider's arm, knocked her directly into the path of the pyrotechnics. Within seconds, she was on fire, on live television, while the cameras continued to roll. Viewers across the country watched in disbelief as the cheerful children's show turned into a scene of panic. Turner scrambled away from the flames, rolling on the ground in a desperate attempt to put out the fire spreading across her clothes. The shock of the moment was almost as overwhelming as the physical pain. This wasn't a rehearsal. There was no chance to cut away in time. It was all happening in real time, right in front of millions of people. She suffered burns to her head and hands, along with temporary hearing loss from the blast. For a few terrifying seconds, it had looked as though the accident could be fatal. Instead, the program hastily cut to co-presenter Jenny Powell, who tried to steady her voice as she assured viewers that Turner was receiving first aid and was alive, but the damage had already been done. The cheerful tone of the morning was gone, replaced by a sense of shock that lingered long after the broadcast ended. An investigation later revealed that the accident was caused by a breakdown in communication between the production team and the stunt organizers. A simple misunderstanding, just a split-second mistake, had placed Turner dangerously close to the pyrotechnic effects at exactly the wrong moment. The injuries forced her to step away from work while she recovered. Several layers of skin on her hands had been burned, leaving lasting discoloration. She lost patches of hair, along with her eyebrows and eyelashes. Even after healing, the scars remained, physical reminders of how close she had come to something far worse. Despite everything, Turner later said she considered herself lucky to be alive. The accident could easily have ended in tragedy. The incident also left a lasting mark on the show and the BBC itself. It happened during the very first episode of UP2U's second series, and the program ended its run later that year. In the aftermath, Turner became a prominent voice for health and safety awareness, even appearing in BBC training videos. Her own experience serving as a stark example of what can go wrong when the live television meets dangerous stunts.
You can see it. There it is. I can't.
The fight took place on June 28th at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Mike Tyson, once the most feared man in boxing, was stepping back into the ring to reclaim the WBA heavyweight title he had lost the year before. In their first bout, Evander Holyfield had stunned the world by controlling the fight and knocking Tyson down before finishing him in the 11th round. Now, the rematch carried enormous pressure. Tyson wanted redemption. Holyfield wanted to prove the first victory was no fluke. Millions tuned in, expecting fireworks, but not the kind that were about to unfold. From the opening bell, the tension was obvious. Holyfield looked sharp and composed, landing clean punches and controlling the pace. Tyson, known for his explosive aggression, seemed increasingly frustrated. There were repeated clashes of heads during the fight, and in the second round, one of those collisions opened a cut over Tyson's right eye. Referee Mills Lane ruled it accidental, but it only seemed to fuel Tyson's anger. You could feel it through the screen, the irritation, the boiling frustration, the sense that something wasn't right. When the third round began, Tyson left his corner without his mouthpiece, forcing the referee to step in and delay the action. It was a small moment, but it felt like a warning sign. Seconds later, the fight exploded into chaos. During a clinch, with both men locked together, Tyson suddenly lunged forward and bit down on Holyfield's right ear. The crowd gasped. For a split second, it didn't even seem real. Then, Holyfield spun away in pain, blood visible, a piece of cartilage torn from his ear. Tyson spatted onto the canvas. Ringside officials rushed in. The arena, once roaring with excitement, fell into a stunned, confused noise that sounded more like disbelief than cheering. After a brief pause and a consultation with the ringside doctor, the fight was allowed to continue, but the tension was unbearable now. Everyone watching knew something had snapped, and then, unbelievably, it happened again. In another clinch, Tyson bit Holyfield's other ear, leaving a deep wound. At that point, there was no coming back. Referee Mills Lane stepped in and disqualified Tyson, ending the fight and marking the first heavyweight title disqualification in more than half a century. But the chaos didn't stop there. Tyson, still furious, tried to confront members of Holyfield's team near the ring. Security had to step in multiple times to keep the situation from escalating further. The consequences were immediate. The Nevada State Athletic Commission revoked Tyson's boxing license and fined him $3 million. Though his license was later reinstated, the incident permanently altered the way people saw him. Holyfield, despite the gruesome injury, recovered and later publicly forgave Tyson, showing a level of composure that contrasted sharply with the violence of that night. The fight generated around $180 million in revenue, but the numbers hardly mattered. No one remembered the event for its athleticism or its competition. They remembered the bite. Years later, Tyson admitted that in the heat of the moment he had lost control completely. He even confessed that he had felt an overwhelming urge to seriously harm Holyfield, describing a rage that consumed his judgment.